Welcome to Lancefield on the Line. My name is David Lancefield, and I'm really happy to welcome Christian Stadler and Julia Hautz to the show. They are two of the four authors of the book Open Strategy, Mastering Disruption from Outside the C-Suite, a book that I've reviewed for Strategy and Business, and I've loved reading. They are both professors of strategic management, Christian at the Warwick Business School in the UK, and Julia at the University of Innsbruck in Austria, and I believe former colleagues, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome to the show, both of you. Great to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you, David.
Fantastic. So we're going to get stuck into what it takes to design, implement strategy, and obviously in a more open way, and explore some of the approaches. So this is going to be both a bit of theory, but also the practical approaches that you've seen and observed and researched. As I said before to you guys, this is a topic that I've tried to practice both in reality and in my mindset, I guess, also, and for many years. So I really love this topic, as I do for all of them, but particularly this one, if I may say so. So let's paint a picture of a caricature of many organizations, although I'm not sure it's that much of a caricature. Strategy is designed, conceived behind closed doors, often the top of the organization, and then broadcast to the masses. And then suddenly they say, yes, I understand it. And then they go off and implement it. And it's all magic. And we know, however, most strategies fail. However, at the same time, a lot of other activities across the organization are becoming more open. Innovation being a topic, it's been open for many, many years. So why has it taken so long for strategy to become more open? Julia, do you want to kick off with that one?
Yes, thank you. And I think that's a great question to ask. And what we have experienced while talking with a lot of leaders, also we see that still many leaders see strategy development and strategy deliberations as their role. So it's their unique role. And they might feel a little bit that inviting others into the process might compromise their role a little bit, or they might lose power and status. So that might be reasons why still many leaders shy away a little bit from opening up. But we feel that at the moment, there is not a lot of choice left for organizations. They are facing so many challenges. They are facing threat of disruptions. We have a pandemic, new ways of working, climate change. And more leaders really realize that open strategy and opening up can really provide new answers to those challenges. And as you have said, many other domains have already opened up. So kind of societal changes and technological changes are also supporting this trend to also opening up the strategy field.
Yeah, so actually there's a lot of help that they can have, and actually, if you like, they need to get over themselves that they think they have all the answers. But that's quite a big shift in mindset. But I love the fact that you talk about right at the beginning and throughout that this is one of the biggest barriers to success of an organization, like having a closed approach to strategy. And actually you pick out some other potential causes of why strategies fail, whether it's the wrong framework, lack of capability or intelligence, or even poor consultants, dreadful people as they are. How did you reach that view? How did you reach that sort of view that actually it's about openness that's, if you like, trumps the rest of them? Christian?
Yeah, okay. So, you have a couple of problems typically with strategy. One is on the idea side, that you are remaining in your echo chamber, you talk to the same people. And even, the idea with a consultant is you bring in fresh ideas. But in reality, we know that often leaders work with the same consulting team over years. So it becomes just another kind of echo chamber. So that's one problem, yeah, where you get fresh ideas. Arguably, the even bigger problem is the one which you sort of alluded to in the beginning. How do I get everyone motivated to actually follow this path that I'm drawing? And it's a pure illusion if I think, big announcement from the top and the troops are just waiting at the start to, hey, when do I finally get the word and then jump out? Not going to happen. Yeah, not going to happen. So really involving people makes them develop much more of a personal ownership for a new idea. And if they do so, hey, that's an entirely different story. And it's not just that, they don't want to be given orders. It's also about how do I figure out what this big idea means for me? Yeah, I'm working somewhere at the counter of a bank. I'm working somewhere on the factory floor. I run a shift or so. But these big ideas here that come from the top often don't make sense to me. And if I'm involved already in the discussion of the process, I can figure it out. Yeah, I can talk to others much early on. And that's why we think, openness is so crucial.
And that's one of the things I particularly liked about the book is that the open approach, although it does vary, has to go throughout the whole process, as opposed to what you often see is you have lots of crowdsourcing ideas at the beginning, lots of events, lots of theatre, if you like, and then effectively once you've got those ideas, it closes down. Whereas actually it's the implementation, as you just said, is hard to do, and hence you need people who are actually at the the front line involved.
And one more thing, David, I want to add actually, because you asked about the consultant specifically. I don't want to, piss off an entire crowd who's buying our book here. So there's a role for them as well. Twofold. First of all, who's going to run some of these engagement workshops, etc., that help you to open up? That's typically consultants, yeah. And even if you're not a consultant who does that, say, ideas have been generated this way. There's often a lot of nitty-gritty work to figure out the details, work out the plans, and that's where consultants are really good. So no doubt they have a role also in our open world.
Very good. You're such a diplomat. The I mean, having both practiced and studied the sort of the art and science of consulting, there is a shift from more enablement than, if you like, telling, which I think some consulting firms get, others don't. So if we all buy this concept, assuming we do, having listened to this so far, is open now a default approach to strategy? Is that the mindset? Or do you still see a role for more closed approaches?
Yes, I don't think that we see open strategy as a default in every situation. So we still see situations where, let's say, the traditional closed approach can be very helpful. For example, if a company wants to fine-tune its core business in a quite stable situation, we argue that the open approach is most valuable really in situations where organizations are facing those fundamental threats of disruption, of changes, and most companies are facing such a situation at the moment. And we also do not recommend to just jump in with both feet and open up everything and the entire process. So we really recommend in our book that you could open up gradually, that you could start with one business division, which is facing threat of disruption. You can try different tools, experiment, learn what works best for you, and then over time transfer it to other phases of the process, to other business divisions. So that's important. It's not a yes or no, open or closed question.
I can give an example for this as well. Yeah. So as you might have seen from the book, we work closely with IMP, a German consulting company, on this. They've recently worked with a company in the food sector where they developed something in one of the smaller units first. After that, inspired the leadership. They saw it worked. They took it to the biggest division afterwards. It was a learning process. Yeah, you learn how to be open.
I think that's great because it can be quite a daunting task to sort of go from thinking about being open and getting it, and then it's quite a risky. It could feel quite risky. And secondly, it's you feel there's quite a degree of vulnerability, especially if you think you are, the person responsible for it. You are. There's a lot more trust you have to engender to others. So starting small and working out how to scale it, I think, makes a lot of sense. Well, we've talked a lot about people within the organisation. I guess the question that the flip question to that is the role of outsiders, and you talk about the role of outsiders in one important way, actually, if you like, mitigating some of the biases that we can have within the organization and through the process. Tell us a bit more about the role that these outsiders play and how pivotal they are in an open strategy approach.
Julia, you want to take this one?
I can start off and then hand over to you. It might be good to first talk about what we see as outsiders, because outsiders do not necessarily have to be people from outside the organization. Outsiders can also be people from outside the top management team, from outside the C-suite. So just people who bring in new perspectives, new ideas, we have talked with a guy who is leading an online strategy community at Ericsson. And he was talking about the community where just employees were participating. And he said, you can't believe what knowledge and experience you detect when you're talking to people throughout the organization. He said it's just like magic. So he was really excited about what you have among your employees. So there's a lot of diversity, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of valuable knowledge distributed throughout your organizations, throughout hierarchies and functions, and you might not even be aware of it. So I think that's one important point, which helps you to overcome the specific biases that we are talking about.
But where you're right, David, is we do also talk about going even further. So not just outside your company, even outside your industry. And there's a number of workshop type modules that, I'm again going back to IMP, I guess, they played a big role in the book here. They set up these workshops where half of the participants are from outside the organization and typically from very, very different places, deliberately. Because they bring entirely different perspectives on the problem. And if they're not half, what's in their experience happens is that they're drowned out by the internal voices who say, well, but it doesn't work for us, good idea in principle, but will never fly. If you have, on the other hand, a strong characters and from outside, then it kind of takes, it is possible, to get traction from these guys. As well, who come.
I think that half is very important, as you say, because I've been in situations where you have big characters, but a small number of them, and they are listened to. Once they've sort of exhausted their energy and shared their ideas, it's sort of, oh, thanks very much. Let's go back to the conversation we would have had otherwise. We touched on biases there, just in the process.
So no doubt, if it's you, David, we don't need half. I think you could carry it on your own, but not everyone is like that.
You're very generous. But it's not true. You need a lot more than half. Then, but before I go red, which I don't generally do. But let's go back to biases though. What do you think some of the most limiting biases are in the strategy process that outsiders, whether internal or external, can overcome? So just perhaps pick one you think is most limiting or harmful.
The list is very long, So one I think that tends to happen a lot in the corporate setting is the terminology is isomorphism, similarity in form. What it really means is if I'm surrounded by the same group of people, but also the same group of competitors, then I start to become more and more similar over time. You see this, for example, when Netflix first arrived on the scene. The cable companies in the United States, they didn't respond the way they should have. What they should have done is, people didn't like high subscription fees. They didn't like lots of advertising breaks. But in fact, they doubled down on this strategy. They increased the subscription fees even more and increased the advertisement time in order to make up for lost revenues. And it was logic for them because they looked at their established competitors. They did it as well. But looking beyond that, would take you a step further. So benchmarking in a way often doesn't do us a service here. It just sort of drives us to all being similar. And when you think, what's the core thing about strategy? It's about, I try to do something different from what anybody else does. And that's, I think, where openness can help you to overcome that particular problem.
And of course, we are also talking a book about confirmation bias. Over time, we all tend to seek information and consider information that confirms our beliefs and our assumptions and our existing cognitive models. So it's very difficult for us to give or to consider information that are not confirming, but going against those beliefs. So I think having, like we said, an amount of externals that tell us it's important to have a different view helps us a little bit to overcome those confirmation biases. And very often leaders tend to be characterized by overconfidence. So they tend to believe in their own prediction abilities and in their capabilities to foresee the future. So it also helps to have some outside perspectives that helps you to set this in relationship a little bit.
And
it's a conundrum, how do you become a leader? You have to be pretty confident, otherwise you'll never end up there. But when you're there, you're suddenly supposed to be different. How do you do that?
I guess you have to be confident in your abilities and confident in knowing when and where to ask for help, and self-aware enough, which is quite rare. But it's also the quality of the questions. So you can, in terms of confirmation bias, the quality of the questions in the strategy process is often, I think, one of the missing ingredients. Either the questions are closed or judgmental and so forth. And actually asking a question is seen to be a sign of weakness as opposed to saying, here's the answer or here's how I think. But you talked about leaders there and you know, the overconfident leaders. And imagine, you know, you are a leader and you've opened up a part of the strategy process. You've dabbled your feet in it, if you like. You also say that, you know, that doesn't mean they step back, right? This is not some free for all or democratic process once they've opened it up. So tell us a bit more about where leaders should really invest their time, you know, strategically themselves in that process.
I think that's a very, very important point, that opening up strategy, it's not about a transfer of decision rights. So it's not about democratizing strategy. It's not about letting others take part in the decision making itself. That's very, very important. We see the role of leaders in the open strategy process much more in initiating those projects, first facilitating the conversation, really listening, recognizing, but also, and I think that's the most important part, acknowledging the contributions that people are providing, but then in the end, taking the decisions. And it's very important to be very explicit about the fact that the leader or the leadership team will take the decision in the end, because we have also seen examples where that was not so clear from the very beginning, and participants were developing very high expectations and expected to be involved throughout the entire process and also in decision making. And if those expectations are not met, this can of course lead to disappointment, to frustrations, to demotivation. And by the way, that also happens if their contributions are not acknowledged at all. So if they do not feel that their contributions or ideas are valued somehow and are acknowledged and recognized, it could even be a little like of a leader on a platform or a comment, something like this. It's clear that not everything can be realized in the end, but if there is no acknowledgement, this can have really negative consequences. So that's the role of top management in an open strategy process. Show active support and get engaged actively with the ideas and contributions.
They have to be really strategic with their time and attention and make choices as opposed to sort of dipping in or out. And at the time of this recording, I'm now thinking about the role that political leaders are playing at COP26. And I'm not sure they're practicing what you've just said, but on one of the world's biggest issues, if not the biggest issue in the world.
David, if I can take you up on this, yeah, because I actually have an idea about this. I thought a little bit, you know, with COP. I don't think that they're useless, these kind of big conferences, but, you know, imagine if you take it a step further. If after the conference is done, you use some of those open techniques, yeah, for example, there's this jam technology that IBM developed where you can involve, the biggest one they have done is 160,000, but I think, you know, they can involve even more people. Yes. Because in the end, whether we succeed on climate change or so, partly, yeah, the policies matter, but it's a lot of sort of the smaller actions. And in societies, we at the moment have so much polarization around, you know, all the big topics, it seems, including climate change. So if you know, have a moderated conversation where people can chip in, where companies can chip in, where politicians can chip in, you might find sort of micro actions that come out of that help. So, you know, this open strategy idea, also the big problem of society, I think they have some leverage there.
I completely agree. I mean, it's brilliant. I think there are so many fora, virtual and physical, where we don't tap into the full potential of the crowd. But what it takes, and your book describes this in some detail, it takes proper skill as to the design and actually the implementation of it. And you have some lovely frameworks, beautiful diagrams, by the way, throughout the book, which describe sort of, if you like, the dimensions of how to design the experiments or the crowdsourcing or the community building and so forth. One thing I really liked about the book as well was the fact that, yes, you had some examples like, you know, the US ones that we sometimes read about, although with your own spin on flavor of it. But you had some more Germanic examples reflecting, I guess, your own backgrounds and that, which was refreshing and different. Go on, pick out, it would be unfair to pick out one, but I'm going to ask you to. So pick out one where you thought, wow, their approach to open strategy has just blown my mind. Go on, pick out one. You can have one each briefly.
One each. Okay, I'll give it a start, yeah. So the one I liked a lot was Saxonia. It's a small software house from east of Germany, and they started to open up in a point at their history when things were looking really downwards, yeah. So they were flirting with bankruptcy at this stage, and by starting to engage the wisdom first of an enlarged leadership team, and then there was really this push from the company, software developers, yeah. So they used to kind of work interactive. They wanted to also have a say. And the company said, yes, we'll do this. Yeah. And they have these regular strategy sprints now where each time roughly a quarter of the entire organization participates in that, which is amazing. I mean, break this down for some of the large companies. That means whenever you discuss strategy, you would have in a company which is 100,000 plus people, 25,000 people participating. And they turned around phenomenally. They've now been bought by a larger company, but not because of need, but because that larger company actually sees that potential and wants to take it one step further. So that was the story that really fascinated me.
Brilliant. Beat that, Julia. Go on, beat that.
I have to admit that my favorite example, it's not from Europe, it's an US example, but I love the examples from the military background that we have, because we have examples from the US Navy, from the US intelligence community, and those are just organizations that I would have never associated with openness, because they are just dealing with so much sensitive information, and you would associate them with extreme secrecy. And you would never think that those are the organizations that have been very successfully applying open strategy approaches by finding a way to not having a trade-off between openness and secrecy. And I find really cool that you could see from those examples that you can open up and benefit from openness without sacrificing any sensitive information and without giving away any important company secrets. So that was, I think, the US intelligence community was my favorite example.
Yeah, really clever framing and design to sort of get the answers they wanted, if you like, but not giving away any state secrets. Christian, sorry.
And I almost have to admit here that I'm sort of, starting to join Julia here. I think it was in the end the coolest example. How can you beat the CIA doing open strategy? If the CEO tells you, oh, I'm concerned about my secrets, really? CIA is doing it.
Yeah, I've just created a little contest there. I'm practicing what you preach between the two of you on the best example. But the one thing I like about your example, Christian, is that the scale of the involvement is quite remarkable, because I think a lot of the time that many people would say, oh, we'll do a bit of this, but let's not take up too much time. But then what will happen is they'll still then have a lot of time later on down the track, even more, because they haven't involved people earlier to share their ideas. Mm-hmm. That's quite a shift in mindset in terms of it being an investment as opposed to a cost.
And even with large companies, you can do it. I think Julia was the one who's talking to Telefonica. So, it's better if you share this, but I think they have a really large proportion of their company constantly engaging in that as well.
Yes, I mean, they are using an employee social network to constantly involve all of their employees, have the chance to engage in these strategy discussions. And they have actually started out in a way that Christian proposed for big political summits. They opened up their executive summit, which was taking place every 2 years. And they started with just involving senior leaders, and then they live streamed little parts of it. And they gradually opened up more and more. And now all 125,000 employees can participate via live stream, but can also engage in live discussion and comments. And they are really taking it to a next level, because I think in 2019, their CEO asked all employees to submit ideas and suggestions about how could Telefonica develop in the future. And they really started the biggest strategy turnaround based on the suggestions taken in this network. So, and they have really immense numbers of involvement, and they really saw that by in relationship to the involvement in the employee social network, the sense of belonging of employees also increased substantially. And I think that's a great example. They really say, okay, they feel part of the process. Strategy is not something that is done to them, they do it with them together. So they are actively feeling part of it. And I think that's the most important thing, because that's what you said, by involving them already up front, you also have the positive consequences in executing and realizing things, because everybody is already feeling part of it.
And it's demystifying strategy, because if you ask people about strategy, it tends to be that word that people say, oh, it's for somebody else, or I don't really understand what it means. But actually, you're just saying it's about making decisions about where we play and how we build our organization and so forth. And in that example, shows I have read the book, the CEO was involved at critical times, right, in some of the chat, actually giving comments, as opposed to this is what you said, and I believe it, of course, rather than his chief of staff or PA or somebody else doing it on their behalf, which, by the way, often happens.
Exactly.
You mentioned a number of big organizations. How well does this apply to smaller organizations? Because the reason I ask that is because although you might think it's easier for smaller organizations, one, there may be a question about whether they can or want to invest in a process like this. And secondly, they often have very strong characters, especially founder-led businesses, where they may talk about openness, but actually the reality on the ground is it's down to one or two people. So is this an approach for big companies, or does it apply to some of the smaller ones?
So obviously I've given you the Saxonia example already. Yeah, that is a small company. I think they had 125 employees when they started. If you want to go really startup phase, then you might have strong characters, but they talk about this stuff quite openly and they engage with a lot of people. Yeah, you have these sort of two folks somewhere in the room who try and dream up an idea, but in Silicon Valley is the first place where people start to brag about their ideas early on, and also start to pick up ideas from others. They all pretend to be the first ones to have this idea, but I think they often pick it up elsewhere by having these conversations all around.
But what we have found, because we have also talked to a lot of organizations like those family businesses, mid-sized family businesses in Germany, which are very often led by this founder or still family management, which are very influential in their company. And we have seen that here it really depends on the leader and his or her commitment to the open approach, and if they are engaged and if they believe in this open approach. And surprisingly, many of them have been quite excited about this approach. If you have some leaders who believe in this approach and support it, then it works out very well. If you don't have this commitment from top management, you will have a hard time. Then it's very difficult.
So I want to dig into getting a bit more personal in my last few questions. I always do this on every show. Hence,
have we done something that shouldn't come out?
Yeah, who knows? That's for you to say. But the two questions I have, the first one is around how well you practice what you preach in your own departments, in your business school and university. So, have you encouraged and stimulated an open strategy approach to your own department?
So I can take this one first, yeah. So actually the very nature of academic work is a very open one. I am employed at the University of Warwick, but I do projects with Julia, obviously, yeah, who's at the University of Innsbruck. I do a lot with a couple of people in Dartmouth, with somebody in Bocconi. So, we constantly have this exchange of ideas when it comes to the research, which is actually the biggest chunk of our work. Many people think we mainly teach, but, that's actually not true, yeah. It pays our bills, the teaching, but most of our work is research. And we are tremendously open, I think, in that space. So I would say, yeah.
I think we have at least a little bit tried to use an open approach also with this book, because we are people from academic, but also people who applied the open approach in practice and did consulting work on this and tried to get different perspectives from those domains, at least, and not only the scientific approach, let's say this.
We did it with the book cover as well, yeah, if you remember. We had the first round of 2 book covers, which we put out there for people to give us feedback. There was one which was slightly favored, but we also got a lot of comments not good enough. So we, did a second round. And second round, we got 1,000 people to vote, actually, with a clear winner, which is the current cover. And I think it's a lot cooler than what we originally got from the publisher's side. So, open marketing, I guess you'd call that.
Very good. Yeah.
And I think we have also realized that today you won't be able to do great work or new work, let's say relevant work, if you're not working together with people from different domains, from IT, from, math. You need people with different estimation skills and statistical skills and with ideas from different domains. So I think we have all realized that we are not able to do something alone. So and I try to do what we preach. I've just started a little research project together with my sister, who is doing transplant surgery and doing research on this, on organ transplantations. And we are trying to work on business models based on transplant surgery, which is a kind of cool thing, but we are trying to bring those domains together a little bit. Let's see how it works out.
That sounds fascinating and quite a shift. I think some academics do that more than others, but it's encouraging to hear that. And in terms of
one more thing, David. Yeah, we're even working with a game developer who is working on integrating some of the open strategy ideas into a team building game.
Oh, well done. Fantastic. So you have an entrepreneurial edge and a commercial edge to you as well. Quite right too.
Well, we're more sort of contributing to it. Yeah. So it's the game guys.
Well, make sure you get a good deal, but make sure you keep your get a good share of the IP and so on. And that's the business model aspect of it. But for the 4 of you writing a book, that's relatively rare, I would argue. What was the best and hardest bits of writing a book together? And go on, give us the juicy bits.
So first of all, I think it's less unusual for us because we do this also when we work on articles. That is the sort of more typical scholarly work where
Fair point.
Somebody on a particular chapter would take the lead, does a first sort of write up and then bounces it back, get feedback, then maybe hand it over to somebody else. It goes around again. That's not that unusual for us, really, I have to say.
Okay. So what was so the question? So it's not unusual. So I was wrong, but perhaps not on the business books. But but what was the most enjoyable bit and the hardest bit?
Julia and I, we have worked together for since 15 years or so, in Kurt as well. So the 3 of us were extremely used to each other, and kind of have strong routines as well. Stefan was a new addition to that, but worked fine. Kurt, I think, has actually worked with him for a number of years as well, but the 2 of us haven't.
So I'm going to try once more, and not on the same question, but there must be something. Okay, give me you have your own stream of work, of course, in academia in this field, and I guess with the IMP consulting their own practice area. But were there any surprises when you came together to actually still an effort to write a book together? Were there any surprises where you thought, wow, I haven't thought of it that way or that angle before?
I don't know, I would sort of look at it slightly different. Your thoughts on this as well, Julia. I think the toughest part for us was finding a publisher. Essentially, we've done some stuff before, but in the wide world of superstars, we were no names. Yeah. So, Malcolm Gladwell will get a deal relatively easily, as you can imagine. It's slightly different for us. And that was an uphill struggle. Yeah? We are extremely pleased with what MIT Press has done. Been super supportive, and I think they are pleased that they took us on because the book did phenomenally well. And some of the big publishing houses who thought maybe our idea is not fresh enough. I hope they're eating their shoes now because clearly with some of the recognition that the book is getting, at least the newness factor, I think can hardly be disputed.
And I have to admit also, when we are talking about the process itself, it was also very interesting to have this constant dialogue and debate between us coming more from an academic perspective, joining companies and talking and doing the interviews, but then always having the insights, especially from Stefan, coming from everyday work with the companies, because we realized sometimes we were talking about the same things, but just using different languages or different terms and different concepts. And he was bringing extremely helpful insights from companies and talking to all those CEOs day to day. So that was really interesting for us when we were coming a little bit more from an academic perspective.
Yeah.
And from our projects and interviews, what we got as snapshots and combining specific projects. And he had this immense experiences built up over years, talking to those many executives every day with their fears, with their insights, with the challenges that come up every day. So that was sometimes really helpful, and just find out how to come to arrive at the same level, that we were talking about the same things, maybe using different terms and language, and how can we find a common language to transport it in the book then in the end.
And I think that's
of course, there was a battle about ideas sometimes. Yeah, I mean, we all, you probably got the opportunity to see that we're all strong characters, so no one likes to back down, but we had to find a common ground that is best.
I think that point about common language and then common ground is a requirement for great strategy, but often glossed over as people hide behind terminology and so forth. And I agree that there is quite a distinction between interviewing, for example, an executive and or having them in an executive education room versus doing it on the ground, as I try and convince some of the academics I work with. So it's not better, but it is quite different. Sometimes it's better, by the way, in terms of more insights, but a practitioner would say that. So as we draw to a close, final question, which is, so imagine you're in a conversation now with, the audience listening to this who are typically executives, professionals, and they read the book, they've loved it. They say, you know what, we need to open up some form of our strategy process, but I'm a little bit not sure, a bit scared. I just want to emphasize this point. What would be your advice to that person in terms of where to start? Each of you, if you could give your answer. Give
us a call. We'll talk.
Go on. That's a guy. You're a consultant underneath it all. Very, very good. But go on. Beyond that, they should do that, and we'll come on to your details in a moment. Wonderful. Beyond that, go on. Where should they start? What would you start with?
I'd say the test, yeah, Julia. We develop a self-assessment test, yeah, for people to figure out, are they ready for open strategy? You can just go to our website and take the test, yeah. And if you're ready, you'll be told at the end of taking it. If not, there's also a few suggestions of what you can do to become more open. Maybe that's the first thing that you could do. Yes.
Because that's sometimes very surprising, because I think everybody would say, yeah, of course, I'm open and I'm open-minded, and of course, I value diversity and inclusion. And I mean, that's something that everybody would think. But if you're taking the test and if you're going through the questions, you might realize, okay, maybe I'm not feeling comfortable in every situation that is related to openness, and maybe I'm not so comfortable with the uncertainty and the unpredictability. So I think it's good to have an honest assessment of your own mindset and where you are, and then you can see what you can do. We have a lot of recommendations and tips in the book where you can then go on and you can develop an open mindset, and then also continue in your organization.
Yeah, I love I'm a bit skeptical sometimes of these self-assessments, these diagnostics, but I thought this one was really good. And given we talked about the cover earlier, and I'm just going to share it there. I'm your agent, by the way. I will take a share of the commission. But and it's got tabs. It's got tabs on it as well. So it's a brilliant book. I really enjoy reading. I love this conversation. It's very stimulating. It's a topic I'm particularly passionate about. Where can listeners and viewers find out more about you and your great work?
www.openstrategy.info.
There you go. Short and sweet. Fantastic. So that was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. If you want to hear more, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel or podcast, where you can watch more interviews, and do subscribe for more updates. Thank you to both of you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.